So, I want to talk a little bit about the different weeds that we see out here in the papaya field. Because right now, this row behind me right here has just been recently round-upped less than a month ago. And as it's starting to regrow back, the biology kind of determines what sort of weeds or plants you have covering the surface of the earth. So if you have a wound and you rip it completely open, like fresh skin on your arm, you rip it completely open, the stuff that's going to grow back is a scab. It's not necessarily nice skin, it's a scab because your body wants to protect that open wound, wants to protect that open space, and it's not necessarily the nicest because you just had a whole bunch of disturbance and or damage. So just like us, the earth is very analogous to our body, the soil, and it's no different. So when you round up something and essentially create an open wound here, the stuff that grows back tends to be kind of scabby. So here behind me, as things are starting to regrow and not quite as damaged, you see this plant here growing, which I call this guy milkweed, and it's starting to establish itself, and it's really just trying to cover it. This thing's also highly medicinal and acts as, it's trying to clean up the toxins that were left there, which a toxin is not something to be thought of. It's as an entity itself, it's more of a condition. A toxin is a condition of imbalance. So this thing is trying to rebalance the soil, uptake one part that's too much, and rebalance it out, and also in tandem with the microorganisms that this plant supports in its root system as well as its own body system. So milkweed's one of the things. The other thing is this tall cane grass behind me. You'll notice along the roadsides, especially here in Hawaii, anywhere they spray Roundup, this plant right here grows quite prolifically. And so again, I suspect it has a ability with its microorganisms to try to live in this imbalanced toxic system and to slowly try to rebalance it and bring back the beneficial fungus, so that life can then once again thrive and create instead of a scab, a living skin with blood vessels and everything, so nutrients can flow through and the system can become healthy. The other thing that's growing in here right now, trying to come back, is this crotalaria, which is called sun hemp. And this was sown in this field in the very beginning of the project as a cover crop to try to increase the nitrogen and soil fertility naturally via it's a legume family plant. So it's starting to come back as we stop the Roundup spray. And I hope that this will eventually become quite prolific in here. Another grass that's coming up here quite heavy right now is this guy, which I don't know the name of it, but this grass is growing really heavily right on the edges of where it's been Roundupped. And so again, it's probably trying to balance things out. And then another plant that's growing quite prolifically in here, although the Roundup does knock it back, although we're not using it anymore. Oh, look, nice little silver beetle. Again, life in the field. Is this vine. And this vine will climb up the papayas and try to strangle them. So I'm hoping that this guy will go away as we increase the soil fertility. Another thing we got growing in here is this sleeping grass. It's pokey grass. It has DMT in it. That's why I think it has the ability to move, and it may be cognizant. And it was actually brought into Hawaii, I was told, because of this nice flower that it puts out. And someone liked that, so they brought it in, and now it's quite prolific. I actually encourage sleeping grass to grow in my field because it has a really nice deep taproot, and if you pull it up, there's nice microorganism nodules that it proliferates, and it gives a nice smell in its root system, which means it's very microbially active. And then we got this guy, which is it gets quite tall and woody, Has square stems, so leads me to believe it's a mint or basil. Can't quite recall right now. Also, there's a lot of fire ants in the field. I can see them crawling on the stem. But this plant tolerates Roundup really well. It's going to add pseudo-woody type material to my field, especially as I chop and drop this with the bladed weed whacker and then rake it onto the field. It's going to be a great constituent to rebuilding the soils. And then there's these guys here. These guys. Let's see if I can find it in the sunlight a little better. It's all over the field, so it's pretty easy to find. This stuff here, and it grows really fast and is quick to flower. And anytime you see something banging up and flowering really quickly, you know it's using a different type of nitrogen than the nitrogen the plants want. It's more of a bacterial-oriented nitrogen than a fungal-oriented nitrogen. And I don't know what you call this plant, but it puts out nice little flowers. I was told it can cure some cancer. So majority of the weeds tend to be extraordinarily medicinal because they're growing in toxic conditions, so they have this medicinal power within them. Then one of my favorites, actually, this is a hono grass, and this guy is only a pseudo grass, meaning it's not quite a grass. It's between grass and whatever else plants are. And this guy is a sign that fungus is moving into your planting. So I wouldn't really mind having a whole ground cover of hono out here. Most people think it's a bane and try to get rid of it, but in my case I'm trying to actually encourage the growth of it, because not only can I make a great fermented plant juice out of it, it also is quite nice, keeps the ground nice and cool, provides a great microorganism component. Another thing that's starting to sprout up quite prolifically and just bang is this Polo berry. So Polo berries, named after these black little berries growing on it. Polo means black in Ololo, Hawaii. And so these little black berries that grow on here, and they're actually quite edible. They're not the best in the world, but they make a good pie if you wanted to. And this is growing here. Look how big it is. It's quite large already. And it's also a great medicinal plant used in La'au, Lapa'au. And not entirely sure of its uses right at this moment, but I do have reference books that tell me all about these great plants that grow here in Hawaii. And just to show you a little more, looks like this row hasn't been cut in a while. Some taller grass. Here is the Crotalaria going to flower and eventually going to put out nice things for me. But if I can get the camera down here, look how thick and woody that stalk is. It's almost the size of my thumb. And so this should really be chopped and dropped at this point and then raked into the field, although I may allow it to flower and put seeds so that way it can propagate and self-propagate in my field. But I just kind of wanted right now at this point to give you a baseline of what's growing out here in terms of weeds or ground covers. I don't like to call them weeds because they're serving a purpose, and weeds is kind of like a negative connotation unless you're thinking of a different type of weed. And so really, if you look at the ground, it's pretty homogeneous in terms of there's those species I described there. There's probably a few other species out there, but largely the field's been Rounduped and really highly toxified. So these species are medicinal things, not necessarily. They tend to be weedy in the sense that they're thriving on bacterial-oriented nitrogen versus fungally-oriented nitrogen. And between the rows it was bare. I just mulched, chopped, dropped, and mulched this area, but But in the rows, this tall grass growing, and it tolerates Roundup really well. It actually thrives on it. So if you're trying to get rid of this grass, don't, try a different strategy. And just as I'm talking, I see one other species I'd like to talk about. And this is how you know you've had Filipinos around. Love you guys. We're all indigenous somewhere. But this is bitter melon. And this actually has some value to me here. It's a vine, grows pretty well. And maybe it'll start to take over. Hopefully it won't choke out my trees. But bitter melon. But you can see behind me, this is how thick and prolific this grass is. It's just thriving on this Roundup. It's so thick. So I'm gonna have to come through here with the weed whacker, drop it, move it over here, enrich the soil, get the fungus growing so I get a different type of nitrogen naturally occurring in my fields. And then I thought it was important right now to give us a baseline of what's growing out here, because as I start to increase the indigenous microorganisms and restore the soil ecology to a diverse and beneficial form, all of this will change. The ground cover reflects what's beneath. As above, so below. And as the biology gets better, the nitrogen starts to change, the top cover will change. And thank God the papayas are just tolerating and hanging out and having a good time in the meantime. But I do see some white fungus starting on here. So I'm going to have to spray some sulfur and do a few things to alter the biology in a radical way. But the main thing is to get the indigenous microbes out here. Get the mo'akua, perhaps we'll call them, out here, and get things growing well. Gee. And one more Roundup weed, because this one's just so classic of Roundup usage. This guy right here, I don't know what it's called. I call it pseudo horsetail. Not sure of the species or whatever its name is. But this guy, when you spray Roundup, this guy grows. Must be really great at detoxifying the soil some way.